All right. I think we're going to get started. So first things first, I wanted to welcome everyone. I want to really thank you for being here, joining us in the celebration. Let me introduce myself very quickly. My name is Kristy Park Kulski. I'm the editor of Silk and Sinew. I'm also an author of Gothic horror books, Fair's Flesh and House of Pungsu. And really, ultimately, we're here because I want to celebrate this culmination of a journey that's probably about 3 years. It's been taken about 3 years to get here. This anthology has surpassed all my expectations. And the number one reason for that, quite frankly, is the authors, the contributors who brought their stories and their poetry to this anthology have been absolutely incredible. There has been such stunning work, such vulnerable work, such true work. So thank you so much to all of you. This wouldn't exist without you. So I wanted to also say that I started this as a hope that we could explore Asian diaspora experiences through the lens of folk horror. And it's so interesting to me how this has taken on a life of its own, and it's meant something different to each of us. And I think it's been very revealing for anybody who actually gets a chance to read some of these stories. So I want to stop and do a quick overview of our agenda. First, we're going to start with a one-question panel. This is going to be very brief. Rena Mason was not able to join us tonight, but we have Lee Murray, Genevieve Flynn, and Angela Yuriko Smith for that panel. Those I consider the trailblazers who really paved the way for the rest of us of Asian authors in horror, and we really appreciate that. We wouldn't be here without you, doing this. So first we'll start with the opening poetry reading. We have 2 groups after that, also of what I'm going to call like short readings of short stories. They're going to be really brief. We have a lot of readers. It's a chance to get you a really great taste as to what these stories might be about and how they feel. And then we have giveaway announcements throughout. We'll have a giveaway announcement between the 2 groups as well. And then we'll have a closing poetry reading. And after that, we'll finish with a question and answer session. If you have a question, though, throughout the readings, throughout the panels, any of those things, please feel free to go ahead and pop them in the chat. I will try my very best to keep track of them. And I might even stop and have someone answer it then if it seems to be the best place for it. If not, we'll try to answer it toward the end. Okay, so I think I covered everything. So are we all ready to get started with our panel? Very first panel, yay. All right, so the question I have for our panelists, well, let's actually first, let me stop for 1 second. First, let's have the panelists introduce themselves. Angela, do you want to start?
Sure, I can start. Angela Yuriko Smith, and I'm the tag-along trailblazer because it was Jean and Lee that started this whole thing with Black Cranes, and I'm always grateful to them for starting this. Published Space and Time magazine, fan of Kristy Park Kulski, and currently president of the HWA. So this is where you can put the targets, right here. I think that's pretty much it. I'm really happy to be here today.
Genevieve, you want to go ahead?
Okay, I'm also super excited to be here. I'm so excited for this anthology to be launched out into the world, and to be the next iteration of this kind of snowball that has started. I'm Genevieve Flynn. I'm an editor, author, and poet. And along with Lee, we co-edited Black Crane's Tales of Unquiet Women, which was this groundbreaking anthology that we never knew was going to be this huge community, this huge movement. But we just kind of figured that there were no other stories that seemed to reflect our experiences. So we put together this little book that became this big thing. And it's something we're incredibly proud of. I proudly serve on the Horror Writers Association's Diverse Works Committee, and I'm Chinese born in Malaysia, and I now call Australia home. So that's me.
Lee?
Kia ora koutou, everybody. My name is Lee Murray, and I'm coming to you from Aotearoa, New Zealand. I am an author, editor, poet, essayist, screenwriter. I'm a 5-time Bram Stoker Award winner, Shirley Jackson Award winner. I have the New Zealand Prime Minister's Award for Achievement in Fiction, and I am the only Asian person to have ever achieved that. So that's kind of mind-blowing to me. And earlier this year, I was made an officer of the New Zealand Order of Merit for Services to Literature. So that appointment came from King Charles III. So it's been a pretty amazing year for me. But I'm absolutely honoured to be here as part of the Silk and Sinew launch. It seems fitting that Kristy should be the one to take the baton and just carry on. And as Genevieve said, it's a bit of a snowball. I'm really disappointed that Rena wasn't able to be here, because Angela will confirm this, that when we went to that very first StokerCon back in 2016, and Angela and I were these little newbies at the first time at this big international convention of horror writers, and there was Rena running it, and here was an Asian woman with Bram Stoker Awards as well. She was already a winner, and she was just like directing the play. And it just sort of said to me, there is a place for us here, and that representation was so important. And now Angela is the chair of the president of the H.W.A. And so to me, these women are just fundamental to this movement, and I'm just super excited to see where it goes next. And so such an honor to be part of this anthology and part of this group, and thank you for bringing me along. I feel very privileged to be here amongst these wonderful writers.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to our one question panel. Let's go in the same order that we just did the introductions in. And here's the question for you three. In your own opinion, how does Asian diaspora folk horror explore our relationship with an ancestral past, with our present lived realities? How do these impact our concept of home? Angela.
I loved this question because I feel like, and I don't have a lot of experience with other cultures, except for Asian diaspora, but to be not home, we have such an emotion and such an importance on ancestors in typically Asian cultures as a broad sweeping thing. We have a lot of veneration for our ancestors and the places where we come from. But when you're diaspora, you're spread everywhere. And so we wind up in this place where we are the monsters because we cannot do the things that we need to do. My background is Okinawan. My grandmother was Okinawan, and we have bone washing. It's very, very important to take the bones of your ancestors out of the turtle graves and to wash them. And I believe it's called sensaku, but I'm probably mispronouncing that. And so I remember as a kid, my mom telling me, I have to do that. Like, this is, an American kid. I'm like, that is so creepy, Mom. Like, no, I'm never going to go wash these bones. But nobody ever has since then. Like in our family, the bones have not been washed. It's supposed to be every 7 years, I think. And it's just going and going and going. So then now we are the monsters. What are we doing? Where do our souls go? Are our ancestors angry at us? And I think that is why we're just so dang good at horror because we live it. We're speaking to spirits all the time. My uncle visited me. Everybody in the family knows this as a thing. It's not a weird thing in our family. And yeah, so it's not myth to us, it's also reality. And I think that's why I'm just gonna say we do it so well.
All right, Genevieve.
I think for me that folk horror is about, I think, the clash of the outsider and the local. It's that clash of the new and the old, and so much of being part of a diaspora is trying to navigate the culture that you came from and the culture that you land in, and that conflict between the two. And then I think the concept of home becomes this liminal space. It's like it's neither here nor there. If I go back to Malaysia, I look Malaysian, but I don't sound Malaysian. I've lost a lot of the connection to the culture. But in Australia, I don't look like the average white Australian. So it's like, well, where do I really belong? But you have to claim it somewhere. You have to claim home somewhere. But no matter where you do, I think it's a form of breaking. You're breaking ties with your birth family. You're breaking into a new place, and you're also breaking yourself to fit sometimes. And I think the horror is in knowing that you're always going to be an outsider on some level, whether or not it's going back to your home country or in your new place. And there are rules that you will never fully understand. And I think that encapsulates Asian diaspora folk horror.
Oh, gee, I have to follow Genevieve. It's like
Sorry.
ridiculous, and I have to follow on. I think it's such a great question. I think when we think of folk horror, we often think of the landscape and that sort of those stories that circulate around the land and the place that we come from. And when we talk about the diaspora and the Asian diaspora, we're just so diverse and dispersed. So we are all over the place. And if we go from one place to another, then where is the land? Where do we take the land with us? And I think we take the land in our bodies. And we embody it in our stories and in our people. So folk horror for the diaspora, becomes a question of the body and the person and identity. And so that just gives us so much to mine in terms of horror. And I was so excited when Kristy allocated air to me. Because in Maori mythology, which is where I've landed, my family has landed, the sense of the idea of breath as being the source of life, and you can give someone a hongi, which is a greeting where we press noses, and we can share our life-giving force. And so I just love that, because that is also how we tell stories, isn't it? We share, we speak and we share stories. So I do think that's a wonderful analogy for kind of how we move our folk stories into a new culture, but also that sense of the ancestors. And here in New Zealand, our Maori Indigenous people consider the landscape as their ancestors. So with Chinese, I have Chinese background. With Chinese heritage, the idea is you take those ancestors back to the land. Here in New Zealand, the land is your ancestor and nurtures you. So it's wonderful. It's how do you find your place, as Genevieve said, in these conflicting and also connected notions of ancestry and place and personhood. So I think this is just a wonderful opportunity to explore all these themes within an anthology, and I just can't wait to read the whole and see everybody's perspective on this really rich topic. So well done, Kristy.
I love these answers. They're so thought-provoking. I love your minds. Okay. Um, let's pivot to our reading for our opening poem. So if you're not familiar with the anthology, we have an opening poem for the entire anthology. There are opening poems for each of the sections of the anthology, and there's a closing poem for the entirety of the anthology. The way I saw them, I was looking for them to be kind of a prayer, thoughts, kind of that sense of like opening, closing prayers, right? So our first reader is Saba, who has written our opening poem. If you don't mind introducing yourself and letting us know what the title of your poem is.
Thank you, Kristy. First of all, I just want to say I'm really honored and pleased to be here with all of you guys in this conversation and in this community. I think the world's complicated, and having a place that speaks to a sense of belonging is really important. And the question of belonging is so relevant to how we think about horror. So thank you for putting all this together and being here. My name is Saba Sayed Razvi. My poem for you guys today is Treachery for the Forlorn. On this night of 1,000 echoes, the moon hangs bright and low in the sky like a coin, ready to pluck for the ferryman. Which voice would you invoke into the walls of your heart if the wayward would listen? The lover won and lost, or the one kissed only in dreaming? Your mother with her lullabies and chastisements, hearth and harvest for your braids, a faith in your rising star beyond others, your vanquishing fist raised in rebellious defiance? Your father dancing like K Sarah Sarah, smiling, with a hand held to lead you to shore beyond the doldrums of your lost path? Your own self, broken by the teeth of time's illusions, tearing mask from apron and string from the labyrinth's gaze? Every touch of leaf and breeze and cormorant lingers in the clouds, the moon flickering beyond reach, with every thought. Will you look for the glow of pebbles under breadcrumbs if there is no more home to follow? Will you take the boat over stormy waves and through the fog of forgetting? A shrouded figure waits by the crossroads, calling out your name. He stands between an east, a west, a land of monstrous shadows and the bloodied bliss of conquest. He stands, a reminder of the allure of transgression. His eyes look out through yours, in mirrors and still waters and polished stone. A demon slips stark over rice fields and mangrove forests. Roots billow in water, and against the chaos of men's hands, a goddess tends the sacred fecundity of everything green and sleek, an undulating, snake-like dance into balance. His sleeves billow behind him in the shadows. They were never wings. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, so good. So good. Let's just take a minute. Okay. Just perfect opening. Let's thank you so much. Let's pivot now to group one of our short readings of short stories. Let's see. Shauna, let's start with you, if you don't mind introducing yourself and giving us the name of your story.
Yes, thank you all. I'm really excited to be here with you. I'm Shauna Young Ryan. I was formerly the director of the creative writing program at the University of Hawaii, and now I am in California working as a book coach. I have 2 novels, Water Ghosts and Green Island, and I'm reading from my story, The Squatters. The government begins excavating the bones in late February to coincide with the events planned to commemorate the massacre. It's meant to gesture that they truly do intend to follow through on their promise of truth and reconciliation. And with the upcoming election, a way to score political points for the candidates of the ruling party. The site is one of a number of mass graves that have been located in the past 2 decades. And now there's an official governmental department in charge of identifying the victims and honoring them with a proper burial and headstone. I'd like to tell you that we were always solemn as we cataloged and analyzed these lost lives. But we made jokes because laughter is what made us human, alive. Dissociation was part of the job. When I told my mom I was heading to Taiwan, she was both delighted and dismayed. Neither she or I had been back to Taiwan in almost a decade. We both longed for it. She warned me not to mix myself up in the island's contentious politics. It goes so much deeper than you can understand, Alex, she said. I told her the very reason that they were allowing me in was because of my neutrality and my elementary Taiwanese, which no one in my American organization spoke. The earth smells rich and damp as we cut away the green and turn the soil. My colleague, Pei Jun, works with a small trowel. A heavy rain has swept away part of the hillside, but she thinks she can determine the parameters of the original grave. The washed bones have been strewn by the drifting mud, but we cannot touch them yet. It was a dog, a golden retriever, that made the discovery. It galloped down the hill with its newfound toy, gleaming like a sanitized pet store bone in its mouth. Wrestling the object away, its human discovered a jaw in her hand. A tibia could be mistaken for an animal bone, perhaps, but not a human jaw. She called the police. The news crews were there before the police could rope off the area, and Peiju now picks up gum wrappers and bottle caps with a snort. I've been to a number of mass graves. At each excavation, I am newly struck by an inarticulable sense of loss. Certain things hit hard: the skeleton of a teenager in a John Bon Jovi t-shirt and moldering jeans in Bosnia, a skeleton in Myanmar still wearing a stack of beaded bracelets, an open hand of bones that had slipped from the baby it held, a heap of bodies outside of Mexico City without hands. Sometimes the cadavers are partially flesh, and I can almost see their lives. A tarnished barrette still holds back a hank of chestnut hair from a decaying forehead. A Pokemon watch sinks into a softening wrist. Maggots stream out of Nike Air Force One high tops. The bones today are clean, though Peijun finds scraps of cloth. I photograph each piece, record it in my notebook and on my laptop, and put it in a plastic bin. Clean bones are usually old bones, so we have an idea of what we're looking at. How many of these have you done? I ask Peijun in my stilted Taiwanese. This is my third, Peijun answers in English. Are there ever any surviving family members? With DNA testing, we find quite a few, but they're usually distant relatives. Many family lines ended in these graves. So it often is. Change by degrees is too hard. Some prefer to do it in one fell swoop, a sweep of bullets, a community destroyed, rubble to build a new country out of. I've seen it in a dozen places around the world. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Shauna. I just finished Green Island too, and it, oh, so good, so good. Okay, let's Kanishk, would you mind introducing yourself and giving us the title of your story?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Kanishk Tantia. I'm an immigrant from India. I mainly write short stories. You can find sort of the general landscape of where I've published those on my website at kanishkt.com. And, some of them have been in anthologies. I'm extremely proud of the one that I wrote for Kristy's anthology. The story title is Jars of Eels, and you can find that in the estuary section of the anthology. So just here's a little excerpt from the story. Amma, good morning. Mr. Booth had not learned Amma's real name, despite having known her for years. There were too many syllables, and they made him uncomfortable. He called her Amma as the others did, a familiarity she had not granted him. But Amma forgave his transgression, and many others, for Mr. Booth brought other advantages. Mr. Booth, good morning. She planned on selling him fish, of course, but there was an implicit understanding between the coastal villages. Mr. Booth could pay more, therefore should pay more. They had not discussed it, simply mentally adjusted prices when he approached. Mr. Booth, I have fish for you again, sir. Fish and eels, local delicacy, sir. He would never buy eels. They sat in the back of the stall, the few not smart enough to slither out of the nets, the dregs of the ocean. Mr. Booth had no desire for them, and averted his eyes when he saw them floating in glass jars of water. Amma enjoyed his discomfort and made sure to offer him some whenever he visited. The village enjoyed her retellings at night, exaggerating Mr. Booth's reactions, his gagging and retching and pretending not to see the eels. Mr. Booth, how much today? Amma presented an ingratiating smile. When Mr. Booth arrived, she often found herself closing her store early. For you, special rate. Amma, wait. Things are going to change. He smiled at her, and Amma found herself smiling back, even though she felt not the slightest shred of happiness. If Mr. Booth had just bought fish, things would be the same. Instead, he gestured to the man next to him, a man Amma had ignored because he looked like her and was therefore of no importance, like her. This is Anwar. Mr. Booth slapped Anwar on his back, pulled him forward. I'm making the rounds, introducing him to everyone. He'll be here instead of me, new requisitions officer. Amma took him in again, noticed the crisp white uniform he wore, the same kind sloppily stretched over Mr. Booth's more corpulent physique. His uniform was clean, starched, with none of the faded yellow mustard stains and green splotches she had grown used to seeing on Mr. Booth's clothing. He stepped forward, shook her hand, and Amma realized Mr. Booth had never, in 2 years of buying fish, done so. Anwar Singh, pleasure to meet you. Amma nodded at him, and for a moment was reminded of her own son, who loved the sea and the ships and wanted to be like Mr. Booth one day. She had always laughed, but today she would not laugh. It was possible, after all. Anwar had done it. You'll see a lot more of me soon. Anwar smiled, teeth brighter than his uniform. Dhyan rakhna. He hadn't lied. Mr. Booth did not appear again after that day, but Anwar did. Every week, when the first boats came back early in the morning, when the first streaks of purple dawn still choked the skies, Anwar appeared on his little Honda motorbike, as if that would convince someone he wasn't Mr. Booth in disguise. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Nadia, would you mind introducing yourself and telling us the title of your story?
Yes. Thanks, Kristy. So my name's Nadia Bulkin. I'm a horror writer based in Washington, D.C. My first short story collection was called She Said Destroy. My second collection will be a set of 3 novellas coming out from Ghoulish this September called Issues with Authority. Like the protagonist of my story for Silk and Sinew, I'm of Indonesian descent. But unlike my protagonist, Della, I have not gone back to Indonesia with an American friend from college, and maybe there is a reason for that. The title of my story is Things to Know Before You Go, and as I start reading, the 2 girls are going on a nature walk in a remote forest. She wondered why there was no one manning the wooden box, official or otherwise. Normally, at least a few enterprising locals would be hanging around selling snacks or tour guide services, but this stretch of the road was disconcertingly quiet. Not even a stray goat. The word remote popped back into Della's head, as did kutukan. Amid all this vacancy, the mouth of the trail had been allowed to clog with a web of waxy leaves and prickly vines, and for a moment, Mary frowned, and Della was sure she was going to let them go home. But then Mary simply pried apart the vines and stepped into what looked like darkness. Della followed, reminding Mary that they had to be out before 4 p.m. to catch the bus back down the mountain. Christ, would you relax? Act like you want to be here? But she didn't want to be here. She wanted to go home. She did not like the way the unkempt thicket had suddenly given way to a trail so well maintained it looked plucked from a storybook. Gentle ferns lined the trail with such precision they could have been planted. The winding path ahead basked in the sunlight, uncomplicated by either heat or shadow, despite the weight of the canopy like a green cathedral hanging overhead. What exactly are you so scared of? This place is beautiful. Snakes? There was something else, too, some itch where her heart should be. Rationally, she knew that warnings to keep out of sacred spaces were just part of a larger pattern on social programming through storytelling. She'd written an essay on it in comparative religions. She'd cited her own childhood babysitter Matsusi, warning her not to go near wild bamboo because it was home to ghosts, when really it was just home to thorns. Crazy people? Is that it? Mary asked. Oh no, don't tell me. You think we're crossing into the spirit world? She said it in such a wretched, crooked voice that Della instantly wished, in a flash of heat, that she hadn't agreed to come on this trip at all. She forced her tongue against her teeth, a method of peacekeeping that she'd taken up in college to protect her limited social capital. But several years had passed since then. They lived much further apart than a grimy linoleum hallway, and through her rustiness, a bite of honesty slipped out. You wouldn't get it. Mary's eyes narrowed. She wasn't accustomed to being excluded. Disappointment was catching up to the dream, but Mary knew how to turn frustration into a push. Okay, so tell me, how do we protect ourselves? Are there any prayers, code words, since you're the expert? But she didn't know. She had no goddamn idea. The warnings were about staying out of forbidden spaces, not staying safe within them. The only thing she remembered Basusi saying was to not eat any food the spirits offered, or she'd never get back home. A thought that had seriously concerned her, considering how loose and permeable the barriers between the two dimensions seemed to be. But how will I know if I'm in the spirit world? She'd asked. And Basusi had said, you'll know. Except what if she didn't? Thank you.
So good. Let's turn to our last in our group one, Priya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Priya Sridhar, and I'm a speculative fiction writer and nerdy nonfiction writer. So if you need someone to talk about BoJack Horseman or such, I'm more than happy to. And it's interesting to talk about what diaspora and horror mean when they bring together, because I've been struggling with what it means to be Indian, Asian American, especially in this time. And that means, of course, having to use horror, which is all about identities being distorted or changing with the realities that we're seeing, because we are not a monolith, unfortunately. And it means we have to figure out who we are when the community that we think is there isn't, and we have to make a new one. So the story I'm reading is called Mohini's Wrath, and it's about how basically an Indian woman brings her girlfriend to meet her grandparents without explicitly saying that it's her girlfriend, because her grandparents are from the 1930 generation, and they start to get haunted. Kritti's lungs shrunk from the pressure. She tried to sleep. She couldn't breathe. Heat, humidity, sweat, it all weighed on her chest. And the dust. Good God, all the rolling dirt from the roads and construction. It smelt, burnt, and clogged, trampled by cars and rickshaws. The green-flecked idol of Vishnu stared at her from its nook in the living room wall, frozen mid-dance. Her grandmother had draped him with a fresh jasmine garland. The sweet scent gilded the heavy air. She wiped her brow with the cotton bedsheet and flipped the pillow on the couch. Just another day in Chennai before the monsoon season, but she had another reason to sweat. Peony had insisted on coming along on this trip to see her grandparents. She had deliberated all of Krithi's objections, that no one Indian believed in being gay by her pan, that it would be a long and excessive trip, the cost would make it a once-in-a-lifetime experience, and if they got kicked out, then they would have nowhere to stay. Krithi was the last unmarried girl in her family, and she had just wanted to visit before her grandparents got too ill. She didn't want to add more drama to the dressing up in pavades that covered her legs, and seeing relatives that asked about her career prospects as well as her love life. The kids hid their faces and refused to talk. Only made her feel worse. Though she understood them out of all the family members, Krithi had done the same when she was their age, hiding from the large grown-up strangers that wanted to hug her. Peony had been too jet-lagged and dehydrated to hear her explain to her grandparents that Peony was with her and let them draw the conclusions. She had said namaste to them and folded her hands. Nana had raised an eyebrow at her that was more white fuzz than hair. Is she a yoga instructor? He asked Krithi when Peony had gone to shower. A pastry chef, actually, Krithi replied. She works at a 3-star restaurant in the Wynwood area. While the flat had air conditioning, the humidity weighed around them. They slept on couches in the living room, while Nana and Nani slept in the only bedroom. Krithi was not going to displace her elderly grandparents, especially after Nani had recovered from a broken hip. Peony kept insisting she could rough it out. She wanted to explore the city, try new foods, and walk by the seaside. There was so much that they could both do and explore as a couple, and surely Kristy had earned this time alone. Kristy ran her hands through her sweaty hair. Sure, they could do all that, but Nana and Nani would want to spend time with her. They would want to show her off to relatives and potentially Indian men seeking young wives with green cards. She couldn't just be a tourist. Don't you care about seizing the day? Peony would ask. You've been here so many times, and it's my first trip. I think seeing the beach would be great, especially since you rarely go. Kristy had to admit, poking at a hole in the cotton sheet, that Peony wasn't wrong. She had visited the city so many times, but it felt too unfamiliar, always bordered by expectation and social visits. She would bury herself in Indian mythology comic called Amar Chitrakatha and American television to cope. They helped her abide by Nana and Nani's rules, and that meant definitely not snuggling together on the couch. Her lungs protested about the heat, but she fell asleep. Eventually. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Priya. Wonderful. All right, so we are going to turn to our very first giveaway announcement. Lee is going to honor us with announcing who won our Kava coffee set. And these are all just to say thank you for registering, those who were able to register.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me announce the goodies. But before I do that, I want to actually introduce Saba very belatedly, because she forgot to talk about herself, and she's one of my absolute favorite poets of all time, and I have had the privilege of editing her myself in this book here, Under Her Eye. So I'm going to read her bio from there because she's amazing, and she completely ignored the instructions to tell us about herself. And Saba Razvi is Dr. Saba, in fact, and she is the author of In the Crocodile Gardens, an Arjoyan Award nominee, Heliophobia, Limerence and Lux, Of the Divining and the Dead, and Beside the Muezzin's Call and Beyond the Harem's Veil, as well as other poetry, fiction, and essays. She's an associate professor of English and creative writing at the University of Houston in Victoria, Texas, which is why she is such an incredible writer across the board, and her website is sabarazvi.com. So belatedly, I am introducing her, and it was such a gorgeous poem and an absolute stunner of an intro to this anthology. And so now the goodies, drum roll. Woo. The winner of the first raffle prize, a Kavat coffee set, so I'm also already jealous, goes to PM Raymond. So congratulations, Pam, because Pam is also a horror writer, an incredible supporter of this community. So this is really exciting. So thanks, Pam, for supporting us.
Congratulations, Pam. I will be sending you an email, so look out in your email box, and so we can get your set to you. Lee is always so good at making sure that we that we actually introduce ourselves well. So appreciate you. I think when I first experienced Saba's poetry, I was at my very first StokerCon. And she had no idea what this weird girl in the audience who was like, oh my God, that's so good. So I think I ran out immediately to when you did the signing, and I was like, give me all the books. All right, group 2, or in group 2 for short readings for short stories. Let us start with Ayida. Would you mind introducing yourself and giving us the title of your story?
Hi, everyone. I'm so honored and thankful to be part of this incredible community and these conversations. I'm Ayida Shonibar. I write dark and wistful speculative fiction about misfits, monsters, mischief makers. I've had a couple of things come out this year. a science fiction horror story in book 11 about mining renewable energy from an organic source, a poem in Heartline Spec that's a fungal allegory about communal relationships. My dark academia horror story that's a Faustian interpretation of student loans was reprinted, which is my first ever reprint, in The Skull and Laurel. And I have a grounded fantasy flash piece coming out in the Coven of the East anthology later this year, along with several other Silk and Sinew folks, I believe. And there's some other things that hopefully I can share more about soon. So my story is called An Unholy Terroir. It takes inspiration from some of the formative European fairy tales that for centuries have taught children that certain people or experiences are dangerous or evil. I experimented with perspectives a lot in this story, partly to convey how an imperial core that's willing to deploy violence to control its colonies will also be willing to turn that violence inwards to maintain domestic control. This is a fable, or rather a warning. Like all dangers, the disease arrived without notice. Nobody had encountered anything quite like it before. The loss of appetite, the shifting bones, the crumbling of features we recognize as human. It was entirely foreign to us. We forced gruel down the throats of our mothers, confined our children to the safety of their soft-blanketed beds, but none of us knew how to contain the sickness once it chose to take root in our loved ones. In the end, all we really did was grieve and watch them disintegrate. Such desperate times called us to prayer, to convene together, under the guidance of our provost, the man who navigated our community through troubled waters like these. At the end of each week, we congregated in the atrium to pay him our respects, goodwill, and a healthy portion of our earnings. The provost began his ceremonies by taking attendance. We welcomed newcomers who had married in from neighboring towns, and we reminisced over leavers who pursued work opportunities along the trade route, or even more unfortunately, passed away from the illness. Then the provost listened carefully to our reflections. He identified reasons behind the things our simple perspectives were too close to or too far from to understand. He shepherded us toward the good lives we sought. Most importantly, he made sense of things that were otherwise too painful for us to bear. Otto was a good child, he explained to Mrs. Ludwig, Otto's mother. But sometimes he succumbed to laziness. Last month, he postponed his turn to draw water from the well, and the Brinko family was unable to complete my laundry on time. And now, Otto is no more. The heavens sent him the sickness as a punishment to us for not teaching him well. Let this serve as a lesson to us all. We must do better. Hence, out of the unknowable, the provost procured an actionable warning. We were never again late to deliver on his requests. His gray shirts were cleaned first, his blonde hair trimmed before anybody else's, his daughter Angelica's pale face moisturized as soon as she entered the salon. Still, we were not a perfect village, for the illness continued its cull. Week by week, the crowd in the atrium thinned. All of us villagers, the ones well enough to leave our homes, appeared faithfully. Our prayers to the provost lengthened. Our donations deepened. Thank you.
Such a good reading. Thank you. Izzy, if you would you mind introducing yourself and giving us the title of your story?
Yes. Hi all, I'm Izzy, poet, prose writer, and translator, talking to you from the weird wilds of Pennsylvania. I'm going to read you an excerpt of my piece, Pig Feet, which is a horror spin on a common kind of Buddhist parable you find in old Chinese story collections, like by the likes of Jiyun or Pusoning, about a cruel person who finds themselves reborn or reincarnated, or sometimes just magically transforms into a pig. and so realizes the cruelty they visited on other creatures. All right. Have you ever played the game My Other Arms, Ali? It goes like this. You put your arms down by your side or behind your back, and a friend slips behind you and pretends that their arms are yours. This friend then peels an orange and nudges dripping slices between your lips, or picks up knickknacks and turns them this way and that, as if it were you examining them. It is all very unsettling. You look down. Your arms, which are not your arms at all, emerge from beneath your armpits, much lower than you're used to. They seem stubby yet also long, like something distorted underwater. Your mind tells you that these hands are not yours, yet your body, a knowing inside your body, insists that they are. My grandfather, Yang Bolin, a street thug turned village shaman, turned developer of hypnosis apps for SP3 studios late in life, taught me this one afternoon when I was 12. The rest of my relatives were napping after gobbling sea snails and long life noodles to celebrate my grandmother's birthday. He provided the extra set of arms, hairy, and orange, a blood orange. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Izzy. So good. See how lucky this anthology is. Oh, okay. Naz, if you would mind, go ahead and introduce yourself and give us the title of your story.
I kind of just want to send my website to Lee and have her read it. It was so good.
She's so good at that, isn't she?
No,
I'm like, I just need her to tell me what to say.
Well, I'm Robert Nazar Arjoyan. I'm an Armenian in Los Angeles. And I just want to say thanks to Kristy for selecting my story to be a part of this anthology. There are very few Armenians in the horror space. Jolie Tumajan is just the other one I could think of at the top of my head. And being at the table is really awesome. So just my deepest thanks. My story is called New Ancestors, and it's about half Armenian twins who visit Armenia for the first time when they're 18 years old. Oops, where's my story? Here we go. New Ancestors. They are mirror images of one another, their twinned faces at rest in identical attitudes upon either window of the back seat. One left, one right, the tattered leather armrest, this tableau's folding crease. Armenia's green countryside flies past these reflected brothers, meridians there and gone, there and gone. Blonde, plumy hair, lips pursing and relaxing, long legs bent at acute angles, so near their strapping chests. The single distinguishing deviation, which spoils the otherwise perfect illusion, is a broken nose, Liam's. Where Logan boasts the subtle bump of their father's Irish line, Liam's nose more resembles their mother's kin, a burst mess of bone and flesh, one smashed pomegranate fallen from the highest branch of the tallest tree. A spill of mauve stains Liam's proud cheeks, his upper lip, his forehead. The siblings blinked in sync when a halting baritone broke the silence. "This you are did was your premier fighting?" Liam and Logan looked up in stringed unison, as if one's movements determined the other's. The man in the passenger seat of the Mercedes V-Class watched them through the rearview mirror, waiting with his bushy monobrow raised for some sort of a reply. An evil eye dangled on a chain of suncatcher jewels from its perch. "He asks if this was your first fight," said the driver, a woman of fine feature, steering the luxury van along the meandering two-lane blacktop. Her English sounded English. "Yeah," said Liam, unproud. "First fight." "Good," said the stout man and clapped. "You are did a very good." He reached between and below his legs to rummage and produce a mason jar of clear liquid, its idle sloshing an invitation. Liam and Logan spoke wordlessly in their womb-written language. "Mulberry vodka," the woman clarified. "Homemade." "You are will to drink this, eh? Strong for strong." "Okay," they both answered, stereophonic instinct, and drank. sips interspersed with coughs, their neophyte throats at once living kilns and tear ducts corroded pipes. First time for that too, I would wager, said the woman, amusement assuaging her sentence. The palm of her hand smoothed the knitted rim of the steering wheel, that soft, caressing sound, and the boys nodded, their tongues too slick with fire for speech. Also, your first visit to the homeland, from what I understand. That's true, ma'am, replied Logan, and cleared his larynx, growling. Yes, Armenia is a place of many firsts, said the woman. She honked at a roadside fruit vendor and twiddled her manicured fingers. Well, many forgotten firsts, let me say. We founded the first winery and laced the first pair of shoes. We were the first country to ever officially accept Christianity. This was in the 4th century and the first genocide of the 20th century, as you two doubtless are aware. We turned folks on with the first color TV, then saved their souls with the first MRI. When you need cash and stop at an ATM, kiss the mouth of the first Armenian you can find. Yes, we even mapped the heavens with the planet's very first observatory, a sight you will soon behold. We're excited to behold it, said Logan, adulthood and youth still wrestling for supremacy in his vocal cords. Aren't we, Liam? Oh, sure, nice consolation prize. A 4-hour drive to Korahunch, Liam replied through the wreck of his nose while staring at an arterial clot of sheep, jumbled wool as far as he could see. The Mercedes slowed to accommodate this passing flock. Karahunj, not Korahunch, replied the woman, the gentlest of corrections. Predates Stonehenge by a whopping 4,500 years, but her eyes smiled, all-seeing, as they sized up the twins, and crow's feet danced there on her olive skin. Your Armenian is not very good, is it? She asked, finally at full stop. The cross-eyed sheep bleated as they trod the pavement, a further cacophony of hooves and bells. Between us combined, said Logan, there's maybe one decent talker. The words stumbled out from behind the fuzzy line of his teeth. Logan licked his gums and tried to taste. A repulsive crime that will be remedied, she said. The paunchy passenger hissed under his breath, and that blast of spit fluttered his unkempt whiskers. Liam and Logan looked at each other and saw twins of their own twin. What did you say that drink was again? Thank you.
What a great place to leave it off, too. All right. Our last reader of group 2 is Christopher. Christopher, if you don't mind introducing yourself and giving us the title of your story.
So, hello everyone. My name is
You're lagging a bit. I don't know if we lost you.
also happens to be about horror in the diaspora setting, so I'm very excited for that. And my story in the anthology is called
Is Christopher cutting out for everyone? Or is it just me?
Pitch
Okay.
Black Darkness of the Summer's Night. Dongwoo noted it was 1:11 when he heard the bleeping of the electronic door lock, then the rummaging of luggage. Yes, they entered, still carrying their luggage. Huh, son. That's not good. Mother, father, they stood there in those shadows, silent. On the wall. But by the life of him, don't.
Christopher, would you mind maybe turning off your video?
No.
It might
What do you mean
allow
the
us to
airplane
see
cracked?
Yeah, because you're cutting in and out. So if you turn off your video, Laura was saying that it would be helpful if you did that. Sometimes it helps with the
Oh,
sound.
sorry. Am I cutting in and out right now?
Yeah, yeah. So if you maybe turn off your video, might work better.
All right. Hello. Is that
Yes, I can hear you now.
slightly better?
I think so.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I have no idea where I started cutting off.
Pretty early on. I don't know if you
Cut
want to
off as
start
well.
from the top. You're welcome to do that.
Okay, cool. It's black darkness of the summer's night. Dongwon noted it was 11 past 1. Oh, sorry, team. It's quite bad at the moment.
If you're okay with it, we could have Bryan read, and maybe we can come back and see if we got a better signal.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. I'm bummed. I want everyone to hear your story.
Okay.
It's so good.
Yeah.
But it happens, you know, what you gonna do. All right, so well, let's go to the second raffle giveaway winner announcement. Genevieve, would you mind doing the honors?
I'd be very excited. And again, like Lee, I'm very jealous about the for the winner because this prize looks incredible. And I just wanted to say too that I said at the beginning I was excited about the anthology launching, but now listening to all of the readings, I'm even more excited. I can't wait for readers to get hold of this anthology and just be blown away. So thank you, Kristy. So the winner of the second raffle giveaway, the prize is a set of beautiful Korean oracle cards by Alpha Sisters Publishing. And the deck is a one-of-a-kind set with roots in Korean ancestry, Eastern spirituality, nature, and magic. And the winner is Catherine Thao. Congratulations, Catherine. I might have to buy a set myself.
I love those cards. I have a set here as well, which is why I got one too for the giveaway, because they're wonderful, beautiful artwork too. All right. Oh no, I think Christopher might not be able to join us. Well, maybe we'll have to figure out another time. Maybe we can do a pre-recording and like make sure we put it up there. All right. Well, Angela, I don't know if you want to do the honors for turning to our closing poem.
I would love to. And it's actually an honor for me because probably many people in this room and in other rooms listening have heard me talk about how much I love Bryan, Thao, Worra. But when we talk about being good citizens and giving back to our community, I feel like I owe him so much of my own career and I'm going to give you the same advice he gave to me, which was put yourself, your culture into your stories. And when I was first being a little writer, he said that to me, asked me why I didn't have anything Asian in my stories. Well, I was trying to write proper stories because at that time there really wasn't that element in the story. So I was trying to write what I thought would get published. And I followed his advice, and that launched my career. That was my first professional sale, and it just went uphill from that. So Bryan is wise. He's a good person to listen to. He has a ton of awards. He's got 20 awards for literary work and community service, and his arts leadership. He was the first Laotian American to receive a fellowship in literature from the National Endowment for the Arts. So president of the former president of these, I want to say the wrong SFPA, science fiction, no, SFPA, just gonna leave it at SFPA. And he just has so many accolades, but the thing I think to me is that I consider him a friend and a mentor, and he's always remained that mentor. And what he gives to the community, especially the Asian diaspora, is incredible. And so it's a huge honor for me to introduce the man who I feel like I owe so much personally to. So thank you, Bryan, for that, and for being here and for being a part of this anthology.
Oh, thank you, Angela. I really appreciate it. And as I said, when we were working together on your journey in the Horror Writers Association out there, it was just, you had so much amazing talent and work in there. But again, the question is that in the nature of global publishing, we can so often be convinced to push our identities down, to hide and mask and paper over, the things that actually make our work fundamentally unique and worth reaching for out there. And so in a lot of ways, I am also going to close this in part with the advice that I give to all the students and all the other emerging poets that I do. And I think it also crosses over well into prose, which is that we always have to remember, even in genre literature, and in science fiction, fantasy, horror, no matter what, one of the most important things to remember is the idea that it is not just a question of words on a page or sounds in an ear, but it is a question of souls talking to souls. Now, what those souls have to say is a matter of great divergence, of course, and that's the mystery that I encourage you all to look at in your work and to create fearlessly. That, at the risk of getting too long-winded about it, one of the big things in this anthology that I loved was that it also tied in well to another principle I talk about, that our job is to create works where people see the chaos, the uncertainty, the great mysteries of the cosmos, but they're not paralyzed by it, that we do move forward, that all the creatures, all the mysterious beings, the things that we run into that go bump in the night out there, that come from the ancestral lands to the present. And it's like, that we as writers have that responsibility to give a possibility of confrontation. But let's end this with the poem that I closed the anthology with, entitled "Between the World's Endless Shadows I Knew." Confucius opined, wisdom begins when you call things by their proper names. In India, they warn you, without doubt, all kings must once behold hell. Along the Mekong, if not every shore, beware. When the water is high, fish eat the ants. When the water is low, ants eat the fish. To meet true monsters is to discover almost infinite endings of what could have been, and the beginnings of everything you wish would end, some mysterious, others obvious as a fear-laced breath. At the present rate, we'll all return enough times to learn all of the countless unspoken rules of our shadowy world of flame and blood, fluid and edge, curving teeth and jade labyrinths, that half-baked phoenix beneath a full moon. Remember them by 10,000 terms, perhaps be or yokai, rakshasas or asuras, tatsu, bhut or aswang, naga, oni, rare tiger, or something we dare not write down, even here, only to find it does so little good to know so many true names that are true ends by true evils. You recognize this, but cannot resist, seeking last words, if not wise or caring, at least as fine a sound to scream as any. I'm Bryan and that's my poem. And thank you all very much for being a part of this. Be sure to grab a copy of the anthology, everyone.
Thank you. Amazing. Such a perfect like ending of that, like I was saying, the prayer. It just kiss. Let's turn to our last raffle giveaway, and then we'll have a question and answer session after that. So I'm gonna announce this one. This is for our book tote. And the winner is Jamila R. Keep an eye on your emails. If you have won one of the giveaways, I will be emailing you and getting your information so we can get them to you. All right. We're also gonna try to get some Christopher's reading maybe recorded, and maybe we can upload it separately because we'll make sure everyone gets a chance to hear it. All right. We can turn to a question and answer session. If anybody, has a question for us, we'd be happy to answer. Other than that, we can always kind of come to an end here. Let's see. Looking back in our chat history here.
No questions at all.
No, we have one. Laura has a question for us. I see that the pre-order at Bad Hand is sold out. What is the best place to buy the anthology?
Great question.
I would say go to your nearest indie or bookshop. That would be the best place. Support indies. If not there, go to your Barnes and Noble and have them order it. I mean, Amazon's always an option, but I don't know. I'm kind of at a place personally where they're like the very last option. Of course, you can always go to your library and ask them to order it as well. And we'd appreciate that. Oh, Priya has a question. I guess more of a nice, okay. What does it mean to be an Asian American now, especially with a lot of our families unmasking? Ooh, that's a good question. Does anyone want to take that?
I have a curious situation that's recently happened, and that is that I've immigrated out of the US. And I can't help but think of like, what does my great grandmother think who fought so hard to get to the US? And so following in her footsteps in a way. And so it's just put me in this space of being the great grandmother, like seeing that. And then how do I represent to my future family? What is my heritage that I'm even passing on? So that's kind of, I guess, what it means to me today is, I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out and it's something that 2 years ago was a pretty simple question for me. And now in this current environment, it's become a much different and much more important question that I do find out that answer, where didn't really, 2 years ago it was a cool answer. Now it's a very important answer.
I mean, I think I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump in on this one because I work with this at kind of a very formal level at the Minnesota state government. I'm the chair of the Council on Asian Pacific Minnesotans, where we are actually working with over 60 different of our communities from across the globe. And also Minnesota is home to the largest transcultural, transracial adoptees out there. And I'm brought to mind that we also just had the Association of Asian American Studies conference over in Boston out there, where we were all trying to ask that question of, why do we treat it as such a pat idea, that identity is just locked in, that in fact the very concept of Asian Americans coalescing and finding the collaborative connective tissue there, that we could all be in alliance with one another, or that we would all find some shared commonalities that resonates with us. That's not the given that you would think. In the 1960s, it was a very radical idea. And I think being Asian American actually is returning to the radical notion there, that in a conversation with some Southeast Asian refugees this weekend, in fact, one of the questions in the anniversary of the Vietnam War that ended 50 years ago was the question of a hell of a lot of people in Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam just died, and struggled and faced these incredible terrors, both literal and metaphysical, then all for the question of democracy. And now for those who are resettled in the United States, then as we watch kind of a questionable interpretation of democracy, or people are always challenging, are you really who you say you are? Are you loyal to the United States? That question of loyalties of, okay, great. Well, if we can celebrate Polish heritage, Italian heritage, Irish heritage, then why is marking our Asian identity is going to be a liability? So it's very challenging out there, and I think that's one of the questions that we need more anthologies like this to address, in fear and uncertainty out there, and it will become an important marker later.
I love
Yeah,
that.
Agree. And I think hearing from the perspective of someone who has firsthand experience working with such communities is reassuring. I admit the reason why I'm struggling with this is that someone who I'm related to, and who I've been making fun of in group texts ever since, was treating certain debates like football games and not like the serious events they should be, only wanting to spectate. That same person commented on two politicians that are from the Tamil Nadu area where my family's from. And one certain second lady was called progressive, and another presidential candidate who's biracial was called not very bright. And yes, I've been making fun of that person, especially with what's been happening in Greenland. Well, I will say, getting hated by Greenland is an accomplishment no other Asian American can claim to have. But I'm struggling with it because just seeing how many, because I'm trying to figure out how I absorb from all my Indian comics, from the stories we hear of Gandhi, who is put on this pedestal that we're fighting for everyone. And then you realize that most people who are related to you, who should know better, aren't doing that. And so I'm struggling with that. And I can tell, and I'm especially struggling with it when an Asian activist community reached out to me and I asked about if there are people that unmasked there, and they couldn't give me a straight answer. They said we're nonpartisan. And so it's something to figure out. Yeah, exactly, Bryan. Exactly. Word to the wise, don't say you're nonpartisan if you want help from activists, because you should be saying we're fighting for everyone. And I think that should be enough. And I do hope that speculative fiction can provide some insight and maybe turn the tide, because it feels like us turning Asian parent guilt on the boomers that are expressing these opinions isn't going to work. At least it hasn't worked so far, though I continue to make fun of them in group text for my own catharsis.
I'd like to add a little bit, if that's okay, just in response to your question, Bria. I think this notion of what it means to be Asian American is opening up a lot more in the context of very turbulent world that we are experiencing and acknowledging right now. The notion of post-colonial rebellion, defiance, identity comes up in conversation a great deal. And unfortunately, at least in the United States, what is Asian American is like a really narrow kind of thing. And people are starting to understand that there's room for diversity and discourse, and that in order to make space for that diversity and discourse, even in the face of so many attempts to shut down ideas of diversity in general, we have to take into account what privilege looks like, what circumstance looks like, that it's not just achievement that determines where we fit in the world, how we fit into it, and who we are connected to. So I think issues of class have often been left out of the discussion of Asian American identity. And through literature, we're starting to see all the ways in which we're connected to others in the world right now, and it's coming back to that conversation at this point. Not just privilege, but also power. What we do with it when we're given that privilege and power. Through community is a kind of power itself, and it can divide, it can do other things, but that question of what we do with power has a lot to do with what we handle when it comes to identifying ourselves as one thing or another or another.
I mean, I think, bouncing off of that, one of the radical questions I was asking some people lately was that in an Asian American, Pan-Asian American coalition, for example, in the unspeakable idea of if America just collapses itself, then would those of us who fall in the Asian American umbrella still say, okay, it's like, America doesn't exist, but Asian America should still exist. And then what are the textures of, could we even out America then in principles of identity, freedom, liberty, all the great stuff out there then? That was the real challenge that we would have to look at, is that, what do you do if somebody doesn't want something that is at another level? It's like a pretty good idea. I think it's like, a democracy where everyone, has an equal chance to say or participate in something. But, it's like if an administration, not saying this one, nonpartisan, it's, it's like, decides that all of a sudden, our community has to go back to, the internment camps or something like that. It's like, okay, it's like, I don't care. It's like we're still going to be good, decent people to each other, facing whatever horrors come out, and that's where something like this comes in, I think.
I think that it's important that we're also not self-erasing, and I see that as a part of a big change. And I saw this anthology as also part of insisting that not only are we not going to self-erase, but we're not going to be erased. I think that's really important. I know for myself, I definitely, and just like Saba was talking about earlier, there's a place you have to recognize. Colorism is a thing. Mm-hmm. I'm very white passing, and there is power in that. And it was important to me. That's why I felt like even just doing the anthology, I could make sure more authors were able to get a chance to get in front of readers. So I do see that as kind of a responsibility.
Yeah, it's really something that a lot of us who've been publishing in more mainstream spaces and everything else like that will tell you how many times we get the notes, the feedback, like, can you make this something so that a majority, which really, let's face it, means a white audience understands what you're doing, but you have to explain every single thing. The counter I once gave in a bad mood, it was like, it's like, okay, look, it's like the Sex and the City have to explain, the history of how Washington crossed Valley Forge in order to tell a simple story about human relationships. No, so why are you making the rest of us perform anthropological work in the process of, no, it's like, you don't know what a pea is, you don't know what a boot is, you don't know what this creature is, you didn't know what a vampire was 200 years ago, but why don't you just roll with it and see where we take you on that? didn't get published with them, but it felt good to at least tell them.
Can I add to that as well? I think the fact that this is an anthology that asks us to question the nature of horror, that's meaningful. Knowing and being aware of horror and atrocity, what that looks like in the imagination and the lived experience, also asks us to consider what accountability looks like in terms of how we identify ourselves as other, as self, as connected, as belonging, or anything else. You have to understand what the monstrous is in order to contend with it. So the fact that we're in this field, maybe we have a fighting chance in the future, right?
Well, what's that one that they said at Gen Con last year or 2 years ago that I really thought stuck with me, where someone was saying that the bulk of American literature, where the idea of a mass market paperback, this mass market fiction entered into the world, also started showing us so many stories in which people encounter the other. And the 21st century's mandate then has been, okay, fine, but what happens when the other starts to talk back, that we actually push back and tell it, I'm not the alien, I'm not a monster here, and that maybe it's, that we look at those traditions, even as some of them have to pivot, but it's like what's that old vampire movie with Christopher Lee, the Seven Golden Vampires? Okay, yeah, you're suddenly fighting the Jiang or Count Dracula. Maybe we all need to find a way to work together out, because we're all agreed the dead should be dead. It's like something.
I don't know. I'm in some communities where the monsters are worshipped. So it would be a case of, yeah, I'm a monster, but I'm a monster that people adore.
Like, what's that one monster that's making the rounds in Korea again, where it's like, if it eats 100 rich people, it gets to go to heaven. And it's kind of like, oh, and everyone has been going like, I've got a list of 100 oligarchs. Can we bring it over to the US?
I wasn't going to quite go there at the end, but yes.
We have another question from Camille with Floaties for Krakens. What was the most difficult aspect of exploring horror through your cultural lenses? How much did you push through, or have you? I'm going to say really quick, I think that exploring horror through, for a Korean lens is all about understanding history and understanding the history, and challenging it, understanding what is monstrous in that history. I know that a lot of Koreans, especially the older generation, just don't want to talk about it, want it to be the past and to move forward. But I think that's the big part and why I wanted to do this with folk horror, because it's there still. And a lot of us don't even know the questions to ask, but there's a feeling, there's the quiet around certain topics. There's just a lack of conversation, almost a sense too that there was never a before immigration. So I think it's embracing that and understanding the complexity of where each of us come from. I know that's especially a challenge for me to think about. Actually on my father's side found out that my white heritage on that side, of not the Polish side, but also goes all the way back to the Mayflower. So I contain that part as well. So what does it mean to be part of a group who is doing the colonizing, but also be part of a group that has experienced that imperialism, right? So I think that's an interesting conflict. We all have something like that.
Kanishk?
Oh, yep. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up colonialism and colonization, because so my story really deals with that pretty deeply. And so to answer Camille's question, for me, one of the sort of big tensions as part of being an Indian is at once the fact that we acknowledge that colonialism was a big recent thing in our history. It's less than 100 years old. It's sort of like has left footprints on culture and architecture. There are like artifacts that are missing from India that are like in other museums around the world. And at the same time, acknowledging that as a culture, we almost venerate Western intellectualism and liberalism to probably a somewhat unhealthy degree. So there is a very large push for wanting to be more like the people who colonized us, while at the same time acknowledging that like the atrocities they committed are real. And how do you deal with that sort of like tension of wanting to some degree, be part of the power that once oppressed you? And so that is sort of like the core confrontation that I was having when I was writing my story. Geneve?
I really like that point where we are thinking about who are the colonizers and ourselves being colonized. Because my story, if I'm to earn my tether, really looks at that and looks at the fact that I'm here because of the choices my ancestors made, and they may not always have been honorable choices. And just that what do you do with that knowledge? And that the idea of the model citizen. I always get that term wrong. What is it? The model, is that right?
The model minority.
Model minority. And that feeling that we're the innocent and the always good, and but there are dark parts of history, and so that was an interesting thing to explore in my story. And that idea of monstrosity, that there is a part of that, I think, within our history, and perhaps within all of us. The choices we might make for family, for the continuation of our lines, what do those lead to? What sort of decisions do they lead to? That was interesting, but also I was a little bit scared of writing about it. I'm so glad Kristy liked the story, because I was like, oh my God, Kristy, I hope this is okay.
Oh my God, it's phenomenal. Amazing.
Ayida, I think, is next.
I think these are such beautiful points. Also about the idea of like trying to survive in a nightmare situation, like what you have to do to survive that can often be very ugly. And then, so like in my story, one of the way that I describe it is it's about making monsters through the eye of the beholder, but then there's the reaction to that, which is embracing monstrosity to survive the beholder. And I think holding that duality even in itself, there's just so many perspectives there that we carry through our ancestors. One of the things that I found difficult as well, like when I was first thinking about the theme, I've moved countries and continents a few times, so I wasn't even sure what branch of diaspora to think of myself from. And I think even when you're like an immigrant in one place and then you like immigrate to another place, it's not the same as having immigrated to the second place for the first time, if that makes sense. Like you've changed in that first place, and that change goes with you, and then you change again, and it's like compound change. So I think that was one of the things that I found really challenging to try to think about in like as the concept of diaspora and storytelling and identity.
Love that. Nas, you had your hand up as well?
Yeah, just real quick. I'm known to ramble, so I'm not going to. I'll try to constrain myself. Yeah, what's horror? What's scary? I think for me, just speaking personally as an Armenian, where I am in LA, there's a lot of Armenians. So I grew up speaking the language. I grew up very immersed in our culture. It wasn't something that was far away. In fact, like there's that little flag right there. when people ask me, what are you? I say I'm Armenian. I don't hyphenate it with I'm just used to saying Armenian. But, you know, the genocide is a thing that happened over 100 years ago, but the horror that we contend with and that I contend with and try to exercise in my stories is that it's still unacknowledged by the people who did it, by the government who did it, the empire that did it. So we as a people still like wake up every morning and there's like 1.5 million corpses that we smell, because we haven't been able to bury, that we haven't been able to like put to rest because of reasons of political and etc. this and that. So we have that, but at the same time, like I wake up and I'm like really Armenian every day, and I, you know, living in a community that's just chock full of us. So it's this weird duality of like being alive alongside like a lot of dead people, metaphorically, obviously, but it's something that we deal with. And now it's literally still happening today, like the cultural erasure of Armenian lands and monuments and sites by Azerbaijan, calling it Albania rather than Armenia. There was like a thing at the Vatican 2 weeks ago, at the Vatican, where they're saying, hey, this is all Albania, when it's not. It's like Armenians have been there for 5,000-6,000 years. So dealing with it still today is like, come on, that really chaps my ass a little. So sorry for not being a thing about it, coy about it, but and then like passing it on. Like now my son has learned that, oh yeah, okay, about 100 years ago, some really bad stuff happened to Armenians. Why, Papa? What happened? And like trying to explain that to him in appropriate ways, while also trying to teach him Armenian and saying like, yeah, we have to learn so that what started 100 years ago is not completed. Like we have to learn our language so we win, you know? It's this weird space of like being culturally proud, but also like, it's very hard to articulate. That's why I write, I guess, because it's easier to write stories about it than like actually put it in human person words. But yeah, anyway, that's the horror for me.
Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, a challenge to me that I've been running into is that much of the monsters, much of the ghosts, the spirits and the metaphysics that go into all of that, it lurks in the back of my head. I'm always cognizant of, I'm trying not to Columbus these sorts of things in a way that we're packaging it up. And as you know, we joked at one of the conventions that I'm happy to introduce you to the culture and the things that are part of our community and our heritage, but I'm also not trying to stat it up for you to suddenly make it something like, okay, you know, here's just another entry in the encyclopedia here. You don't really need to be afraid of it. It's just another monster in the toolbox of literature out there. It was kind of my critique with a recent remake of Nosferatu, for example, where the original Nosferatu, despite its treading on intellectual property rights of the Stoker estate at the time, it still feels like this film of someone who does feel fear, but the limits of the camera. For example, say, this is how I know how to show you the fear I feel when I think about this terrible creature, right? Whereas the creature that we see in the remake, it's like, no, this is the film of someone where you've seen films and you think this is how you show a film about a scary creature. It's not something that you actually believe in fear out there. And I think for those of us in the diaspora, that's a heck of a challenge. We were working with this issue in particular where in the accounts of one of the traditional monsters from our heritage in Southeast Asia, there's a very classical set of, this is the limits the creature has, this is where we know it can't kill you, this is its priorities. Like, it goes after pregnant women, it goes after people who pollute the rivers, etc., etc. But the interesting thing was that after the war, all of a sudden reports started emerging that no, it's like, I don't know why, but it's going after creatures or people that it historically has not gone after before. And it's like, my God, that's right. why do we assume that in that metaphysical world of horrors and everything else like that, but they stay static too, that, but I am this eternal entity there, and that, my rules, that, well, maybe they adapt, maybe they just say, well, you know what, new game on. It's like, we didn't have cell phones to deal with before. We didn't have social media out there. It's like, maybe it's like, I could take the subway now from one prefecture to the other. Okay, how does that change now that I'm running into the ghosts from Poland or some other coast? That's the interesting question to me of the new encounter, the dynamic of the horrors that I think we should be very cognizant of, without necessarily angering these things that they go back thousands of years. It's like, no, I'm not trying to be superstitious, but I would just say, tread a little lightly when you're handling it, and try not to hand it off and just say, and hey guys, roll a d20 and you can kill it off, on a 20 or higher, depending.
I think Izzy had said at one point, it was in her clip, that how it's interesting that if you talk to the mountain spirits, and no matter where you are, you tend to get an answer, right? And I thought that was an interesting and revealing how there's so much overlapped as well, commonality, but at the same time, such existing in multiple worlds simultaneously. I think no matter what you do as a member of the diaspora, you kind of have to forge what that meaning is for yourself. And what some of us don't even have the words anymore to be able to do that. And I think Kanishk mentioned that he was kind of talking about the veneer that Hollywood puts on, and it's simplistic, and I think our society wants us to be easily categorized, and no matter who we are, we're not going to be. We don't fit in anything easy, and we're going to be constantly a challenge. And I think even within ourselves, I mean, I was both being in the military, I was stationed in Japan for a while, and realizing, it's complicated history between Korea and Japan, the complicated history of the US and Japan and Korea, existing as a military member and supporting that mission simultaneously. It's hard to kind of wrap your brain around. But I think that's why I wanted us to explore that, because I want to stop this feeling of the answer is simple, that it's a simple thing of just colonized and colonizer, and while that absolutely exists, there's so much more to the story.
Yeah, that's us giving up our responsibility as in the role of both.
Yes.
I think a little bit about a meeting I had with the Singaporean writers back in 2022, where I had been very American in my interactions and doing the presentations out there, even as I was also talking about, what's it like being a Lao writer in America. And one part of it was just, and I kind of felt like I had to apologize. I was like, okay, it's like, I'm not trying to get you all in trouble over here. And they just say, no, actually, that's quite all right. It's like, that's kind of why we brought you here, and is the adjacent things. Like, yeah, we can't say some of the things you just said in our own homelands, right now, and that, we can at least, having seen someone else say it, that adjacency out there allows us to say, it's like, well, that's what they say. And, for some people who know, that's where it has meaning. And that's why, putting this together, it's like asking ourselves, is the Armenian experience resonating with the Southeast Asian diaspora, for example? I think there's a lot to do that, especially since so much of the Armenian communities in the Central Valley, where a lot of us have now resettled in the aftermath of the war. For example, this was conversations with Rowan and the others, like how do we rebuild? What are those ghosts out there? It's really powerful stuff.
Let's go ahead. I think it's probably a good time to wrap up here. So we're going long. These were some great questions, and I loved all this conversation. You are all so brilliant, and I adore you all, and I adore your stories, your work. I have been absolutely just blessed to have your words in this anthology. I hope everyone goes out there and gets a chance to experience it, because this is much bigger than just a horror anthology. It's something that hasn't been done in this way before, and I really hope that people will take the time to see how complicated all of it is. So thank you for all of you for your work. Thank you for participating. Thank you for everyone who's come and watched us. We appreciate all of you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristy. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Now we have to organize a second follow-up reading. Let's get it.
Yeah, a second follow-up reading, maybe a full chorus too in a few years.
I'm up for it. It's like just name the time and place, but this is a great launch. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night. Happy.
Thanks, everyone.